Did you know that long before texts and DMC, people poured their deepest feelings onto parchment? What ancient sorrows and desperate passions were etched in ink during the Middle Ages, shaping lives and destinies? From the quiet whispers of forbidden love to the thunderous cries of public despair, medieval society held within its intricate tapestry truly devastating stories of affection, loyalty, and loss. Number 7. The Scholar and the Student and the Price of Genius. In the bustling intellectual heart of 12th century Paris, a young woman named Heloise lived with her uncle, Canon Fulbert. Heloise possessed a mind of remarkable brilliance, a rare and shining intellect that drew admiration from all who encountered it. Her uncle, proud of her extraordinary gifts, sought the finest tutor for her, and his choice fell upon a man whose name echoed across Europe, Peter Abelard. A towering figure in philosophy, theology, and logic, was celebrated for his sharp wit and eloquent discourse. Students flocked from far and wide to hear him lecture, eager to absorb his radical new ideas and engage in spirited debate. He was manic, renowned, and, by his own account, full of youthful arrogance. Abelard took up residence in Fulbert's home, ostensibly to guide Heloise through the intricate paths of advanced learning. What began as a meeting of minds soon blossomed into something far more profound and dangerous. Their intellectual connection deepened, evolving into a passionate and clandestine love affair. Heloise, still young but fiercely independent in thought, found herself drawn to Abelard's brilliance and the intensity of his character. Abelard, accustomed to intellectual conquests, found himself captivated by Heloise's exceptional intelligence and her ardent devotion. Their lessons turned into moments of intimate exchange, their shared love for knowledge transforming into a love for each other. The affair was kept secret, hidden within the walls of Fulbert's house. But secrets in a city as vibrant and gossipy as medieval Paris rarely remain concealed for long. When Heloise discovered she was pregnant, the precarious structure of their hidden world began to crumble. To protect Heloise from the scandal that would ruin her reputation, and to avoid public disgrace for both of them, Abelard secretly spirited her away to Brittany, his homeland. There, in a quiet village, she gave birth to a son, whom they named Astrolabe. This moment, filled with the tender joy of new life, was overshadowed by the looming threat of discovery and the harsh realities of their societal constraints. Upon their return to Paris, Abelard, seeking to placate Canon Fulbert and to preserve Heloise's honor as much as possible, proposed a secret marriage. He made a vow to Heloise, binding them together in the eyes of God, though the world would not know it. This act was meant to salvage their situation, but it only served to ignite Fulbert's fury further. The Canon, feeling deeply betrayed and humiliated by Abelard's actions against his beloved niece, exacted a brutal and shocking revenge. While Abelard slept, he was set upon by Fulbert's men and cruelly castrated. This horrific act marked a definitive and devastating turning point for both Heloise and Abelard, tearing their earthly lives apart and forcing them onto separate, desolate paths. Abelard, his career and reputation shattered by the mutilation, sought refuge in monastic life, becoming a monk at the Abbey of Saint-Denis. Heloise, under pressure from Abelard and seeking to protect him from further harm, reluctantly followed suit. She took vows as a nun at the convent of Argentillo, the very place where she had received her early education. The brilliant scholar and his intellectually gifted student, once bound by a passionate and forbidden love, were now separated by the impenetrable walls of monastic life, their connection severed by the vows of chastity and devotion to God. Years passed, a chasm of silence stretching between them. Heloise rose to become the respected abbess of the Paraclete, a community founded by Abelard himself. Abelard, still grappling with his past misfortunes, wrote a deeply personal and confessional work titled Historia Calamitatum, or the story of my misfortunes. In this chronicle of his life, he recounted the entire saga of his relationship with Heloise, his brilliance, his downfall, and his suffering. When Heloise, through an unexpected channel, came across a copy of this book, the long-dormant emotions and memories surged to the surface. It was this discovery that prompted her to break the silence and write to him, not as a lover, but as a soul deeply connected to his past, witnessing his pain. Her first letter to Abelard was a profound and poignant outpouring. She addressed him with a mix of reverence and intimate familiarity, acknowledging the complexities of their bond. To her master, nay, her father. To her husband, nay, her brother. His wife, nay, his sister. To Abelard, Heloise. She spoke of his suffering, not her own, urging him to take solace in God, but her own unaddressed pain shimmered beneath the surface of her words. She reminded him of their past, not with regret for the love, but with an agonizing awareness of the consequences. She spoke of her own forced monasticism, a decision made not for God, but for him. She declared, with raw honesty, "For Christ's sake, not for God's, I took the veil." Her words conveyed an enduring loyalty that transcended their physical separation, a profound love that defied time and circumstance. She expressed her longing for his spiritual guidance, a desire to be cared for by him even in their new separate lives. She wrote, "I am the only one who has loved you truly." Her questions to him were sharp, laden with years of unspoken anguish. Why had he not written to her? Why had he not sought to comfort her when she needed it most? After his own ruin, she felt neglected, forgotten, and yet her profound love for him remained unwavering. Abelard's replies were more theological, urging her to focus on spiritual matters, on God and on the salvation of their souls. He called her his sister in Christ, attempting to redirect their bond to a purely sacred plane. Yet even in his detached scholarly responses, a hint of his own internal struggle, his own lingering affection sometimes slipped through. He offered spiritual counsel, encouraged her to endure her trials with faith, and reiterated the importance of their monastic vows. Heloise's subsequent letters continued to explore the complex interplay of human love and divine devotion. She wrestled with her own conscience, questioning whether she had truly dedicated herself to God when her heart still yearned for a man. She laid bare her soul, her intellectual brilliance matched only by the depth of her emotional torment. She wrote of her struggles with temptation, her regret that she had once found greater pleasure in Abelard's love than in the love of Christ. Her candidness was shocking for the time, revealing a soul grappling with impossible choices and unbearable losses. Her words painted a picture of a woman trapped between earthly devotion and heavenly calling, forever marked by a love that had brought both profound joy and unimaginable sorrow. Their correspondence spanning years became a testament to enduring affection, intellectual kinship, and the profound human cost of a love deemed forbidden. After their deaths, their remains were eventually brought together, laid to rest side by side, a quiet symbol of a bond that even death could not fully erase. Their letters, preserved through centuries, continue to speak of a heartbreak that transcends time. Number 6. The King and the Queen, and a silent betrayal. In the year 1308, a marriage of immense political significance took place in Boulogne-sur-Mer. Edward II, the new King of England, took as his bride Isabella, the young and beautiful daughter of Philip IV of France, known as the Fair. This union was intended to forge a strong alliance between the two powerful nations, cementing peace and cooperation. Isabella, barely 12 years old, arrived in England with high hopes, ready to embrace her role as Queen. Edward II, a man of striking appearance, was known for his charm and athletic prowess, though his reign would quickly prove to be tumultuous. From the outset, their marriage was overshadowed by a presence that seemed to consume the king's affections. This figure was Piers Gaveston, a Gascon knight who had been a companion to Edward since their youth. Edward's attachment to Gaveston was intense and all-consuming, a bond that far surpassed the conventional affections expected between a king and his queen. Gaveston was bestowed with extraordinary titles, lands, and influence, making him the most powerful man in the kingdom after the king himself. He was made Earl of Cornwall, a title traditionally reserved for members of the royal family. Edward's preference for Gaveston was openly displayed, from their intimate conversations to the king's lavish gifts and unwavering attention, often neglecting the queen and the English nobility. Chroniclers of the time recounted the king's deep fondness for Gaveston, describing their bond with terms usually reserved for lovers. It was clear that Edward's heart was irrevocably given to Gaveston, a fact that was both politically deduplicating and personally devastating for Isabella. While there are few surviving direct love letters between Edward and Gaveston in the traditional sense, their relationship was chronicled by contemporaries who noted the profound depth of their attachment. Accounts from the period spoke of Edward's distress when Gaveston was exiled by Edward I, the previous king, and his immediate recall upon Edward II's ascension. Kings' grief at their forced separations was often recorded by those around them, descriptions that read like expressions of deepest longing and sorrow. One chronicler mentioned Edward's inordinate affection for Gaveston, hinting at a passion that defied societal norms and expectations for a monarch. Gaveston, for his part, was arrogant and often disdainful of the English nobility, calling them by insulting nicknames. This fueled the resentment of the powerful barons, who saw him as an impediment to good governance and a drain on the royal treasury. Isabella, a foreign queen, found herself increasingly isolated and ignored by her husband, who spent his time and attention on Gaveston. Her letters home to her father, though primarily political, must have hinted at her growing despair and marginalization within her own court. She was a queen without a king's affection, left to watch as her husband's love was poured into another. The barons, led by Edward's cousin Thomas, Earl of Lancaster, repeatedly demanded Gaveston's banishment. Edward, fiercely protective of his favorite, resisted these demands with all his might, but eventually yielded under immense pressure, sending Gaveston into exile several times. Each separation was a wrenching experience for the king. Accounts describe Edward's profound sorrow at these departures, indicating a bond far stronger than mere friendship. The king's correspondence during these exiles, though more administrative in nature, often bore the underlying weight of his loneliness and longing for Gaveston's return. There were no explicit love letters exchanged publicly, but the historical record is filled with evidence of Edward's desperate attempts to reunite with Gaveston, signaling a deep emotional dependency that transcended political rationality. In 1312, after yet another recall, the barons, weary of Edward's defiance, took matters into their own hands. Gaveston was captured and executed without a trial, a brutal act of defiance against the king's authority. The news of Gaveston's death plunged Edward into an inconsolable grief. Chroniclers describe his utter despair, his rage against those who had murdered his beloved companion. This profound sorrow, lasting for years, spoke volumes about the intensity of his feelings for Gaveston. It was a grief that defined the initial years of his reign following the execution, a raw wound that never truly healed. King's actions, his unrelenting pursuit of those responsible for Gaveston's death, stood as a testament to a love that society deemed unacceptable, a love that ended in ultimate tragedy. Isabella, watching her husband's prolonged mourning for another man, grew increasingly resentful. Her political isolation deepened, and her personal heartbreak solidified into a steely resolve. Over time, Isabella, now known as the She-Wolf of France, formed an alliance with Roger Mortimer, a powerful English baron and former adversary of Edward. Together, they launched an invasion of England, leading to Edward II's eventual deposition and his gruesome death in 1327. Tragic end of Edward II, abandoned by his queen and overthrown by his subjects, was a direct consequence of a love that defied all conventions, a love that brought down a king and fractured a kingdom. The silent, unwritten letters of Isabella's neglect and the fervent, politically damning expressions of Edward's devotion to Gaveston collectively paint a picture of a love story profoundly heartbreaking in its social ostracism, its tragic end, and its devastating consequences for a nation. Number 5. The Poet and the Muse, and Unrequited Longing. In the early 14th century, a young man named Francesco Petrarch lived in the charming city of Avignon, then the seat of the papacy. Petrarch was destined to become one of the greatest poets of the Italian Renaissance, a towering figure whose influence would shape the literary landscape for centuries. But before his fame truly blossomed, his heart was captured by a woman who would become his lifelong muse, Laura. He first encountered her in the church of St. Clare on April 6, 1327, a day that he would forever remember as the moment his life changed. Laura was married, and her identity remains a subject of historical debate. But for Petrarch, she was a living ideal, an embodiment of beauty, virtue, and unattainable grace. Petrarch's love for Laura was immediate and overwhelming, a profound passion that would endure for over 2 decades, even after her death. However, his love was also entirely unrequited. Laura, a virtuous wife, never returned his romantic affections. This did not diminish Petrarch's devotion. Instead, it fueled a lyrical outpouring of sonnets and poems that would become his most famous work, the Canzoniere, or songbook. This collection of 366 poems, primarily sonnets, stands as a monumental work of medieval and Renaissance literature, a collection of love letters addressed to a woman who could never be his. Within these letters, Petrarch explored every facet of his love: his overwhelming desire, his profound despair, his yearning for a response that never came, his jealousy of her husband, and his struggle with the moral implications of his worldly attachment while striving for spiritual purity. He wrote of her golden hair, her radiant eyes, her gentle voice, and the agonizing sweetness of his pain. Each sonnet was a miniature letter, penned with exquisite care, expressing the depths of his soul to an unreachable beloved. In one such letter, sonnet 132, Petrarch laid bare the paradox of his feelings. If it is not love, then what is it I feel? If it is love, by God, what kind of thing is it? If it is good, why then does it bring such bitterness? If evil, why so sweet are its torments? These lines captured the torment of his unrequited love, a beautiful agony that consumed him. He found himself perpetually caught between hope and despair, delighting in her mere presence while simultaneously suffering from her inaccessibility. His words painted a vivid picture of a man haunted by a beautiful image, forever pursuing a dream that could never be realized. Another letter, sonnet 134, depicted the internal struggle, the endless cycle of his longing. I find no peace and have no will to make war. I fear and hope. I burn and I am ice. I fly above the sky and embrace the world. These lines articulated the utter confusion and contradiction of his emotional state, the way his love for Laura simultaneously lifted him to divine heights and plunged him into earthly torment. He was a prisoner of his own heart, willingly bound by invisible chains. The repetition of his yearning, the ceaseless exploration of his sorrow, revealed a love that was both an inspiration and a curse. Petrarch's letters also revealed his deep spiritual conflict. As a devout man, he often wrestled with the sinfulness of his worldly love for Laura, seeing it as a distraction from his devotion to God. Composed poems of repentance, seeking divine forgiveness for his earthly attachments, yet he could never truly detach himself from his muse. His later sonnets, particularly after Laura's death in 1348 from the Black Death, reflected a new dimension of grief and longing. He continued to write to her, Now, beyond the veil of life, his sorrow transformed, but no less profound. He mourned her passing with heartbreaking tenderness, envisioning her as a guiding spirit in heaven, still unattainable, but now in a different realm. He reflected on the ephemeral nature of earthly beauty and the eternal power of the soul, yet his personal lament for her absence remained a core theme. Canzoniere became a model for countless future poets, establishing the sonnet form as a vehicle for expressing passionate and introspective love. Petrarch's legacy was not just in his poetic skill, but in his articulation of a new kind of human experience, the suffering and ecstasy of unrequited love, a love that, though unfulfilled in the physical sense, could transform a soul and produce immortal art. His letters to Laura, though never physically delivered, conveyed a universal truth about the agony of longing and the beauty found in sorrow. They stand as a testament to a heartbreak born of profound desire that could never be satisfied, a love penned in anguish and etched into the annals of literature. Number 4. The Knight and the Princess, and a Fateful Deception. In the late 14th century, a master storyteller named Geoffrey Chaucer wove a tale that would become a cornerstone of English literature. Troilus and Chrysade. Though a fictional work, it was profoundly shaped by the conventions and ideals of courtly love prevalent in medieval society, and it featured some of the most heartbreaking love letters ever imagined. Set during the Trojan War, the poem chronicles the tragic romance between Troilus, a valiant Trojan prince, and Chrysade, a beautiful and virtuous widow, the daughter of the traitorous priest Caucus. Their love story began with the classic elements of courtly romance. Troilus, struck by Chrysade's beauty, fell deeply in love, suffering the pangs of longing and despair from afar. Chrysade, initially hesitant and cautious due to her vulnerable position in Troy, was eventually persuaded by her cunning uncle Pandarus, who acted as a go-between for the lovers. It was through Pandarus that the first letters between Troilus and Chrysade were exchanged, not literal letters on parchment, but poetic expressions of their burgeoning affection, imbued with the emotional weight of secret correspondence. Troilus, consumed by his desire, penned his first heartfelt letter to Chrysade, a missive brimming with adoration and desperate hope. He wrote of his torment, his sleepless nights, and the overwhelming power of her beauty. His words were filled with the humility of a devoted suitor, pleading for a flicker of hope, a sign that his love was not entirely in vain. He expressed his fear of rejection, his vulnerability laid bare in eloquent verse. When Chrysade, moved by his sincerity and encouraged by Pandarus, finally responded, her letter was more guarded, reflecting her cautious nature, but it held a promise of budding affection, a tentative opening of her heart. Their love blossomed, reaching its peak in clandestine meetings. Facilitated by Pandarus, their secret vows of eternal devotion exchanged under the cloak of darkness. They believed their love was strong enough to withstand any challenge. Their hearts intertwined in a bond that felt unbreakable. The poem beautifully depicted their intense passion, their shared moments of joy, and the profound intimacy they developed. Each conversation, each shared glance, each touch was a silent letter of their growing affection. Their blissful world was shattered by the harsh realities of war and politics. In a cruel twist of fate, the Trojans agreed to exchange Chrysade for Antenor, a Trojan warrior captured by the Greeks. The news devastated both Troilus and Chrysade. Troilus, utterly distraught, pleaded for her to stay, for their love to defy the decrees of war. Chrysade, heartbroken but pragmatic, promised to find a way to return to him within 10 days. Their farewell was agony, a scene of profound sorrow and desperate vows. As Chrysade left Troy and entered the Greek camp, she met Diomede, a cunning and persistent Greek warrior. It was during this period of separation that the most heartbreaking letters of the poem were exchanged, or rather the lack thereof. Troilus, clinging to Chryside's promise, sent her a long, passionate letter. In this letter, he poured out his longing, his fears, his unwavering devotion, and his desperate hope for her return. He recounted their shared past, reminded her of their sacred vows, and painted a vivid picture of his suffering in her absence. He wrote of his sleepless nights, his constant vigilance at the city walls, gazing towards the Greek camp, aching for a glimpse of her. He implored her to keep her promise, to find a way back to him, as his life depended on it. Chryside, however, found herself increasingly influenced by Diomedes' advances and the harsh realities of her new life in the Greek camp. She wrestled with her conscience, torn between her loyalty to Troilus and her desire for security and acceptance in a foreign land. Her letters to Troilus, initially filled with sorrow and reassurances of her speedy return, gradually became less frequent, less heartfelt, and eventually ceased altogether. The silence, the lack of reply, became a devastating letter in itself to Troilus. The absence of her words spoke louder than any betrayal. Troilus, waiting anxiously for her return, grew increasingly desperate. He reread her old letters, clinging to every word, every promise. He looked for signs, interpreted omens, and tried to convince himself that she was still true. But as the 10 days stretched into weeks, then months, the brutal truth became undeniable. The final crushing blow came when Troilus discovered a brooch he had given to Chryside on the armor of Diomedes. This object, a tangible symbol of their once sacred love, served as the ultimate letter of her betrayal. The poem concludes with Troilus's utter heartbreak and eventual death in battle, a life cut short by the agony of a love lost and vows broken. Chryside, though she found new companionship, was condemned by her actions and became a figure of tragic notoriety. Chaucer's Troilus and Chrysae, with its imagined letters and its profound exploration of love, loyalty, and betrayal, presented a timeless tale of heartbreak, reminding its medieval audience and generations beyond of the fragility of human promises and the enduring pain of a love that could not withstand the pressures of the world. Number 3. The Queen and her Kingdom, and a Mother's Fierce Loyalty. In the turbulent 15th century, during the brutal Wars of the Roses that tore England apart, a formidable woman stood at the center of the storm, Margaret of Anjou. She was the queen consort of King Henry VI, and her life was a relentless struggle to protect her husband's throne and her son's inheritance. Margaret was a passionate and intelligent woman, a skilled politician in her own right, but her world was constantly threatened by the ambitions of the House of York, led by Richard, Duke of York. While her letters were not traditional love letters in the romantic sense, to her often incapacitated husband, they are filled with profound expressions of loyalty, determination, and heartbreaking anguish for her family and her kingdom. They serve as a powerful testament to a queen's love for her family and her people, even amidst relentless adversity. Margaret arrived in England from France in 1445, a young bride ready to embrace her role. Henry VI, a pious and gentle king, suffered from bouts of mental illness, leaving the governance of the kingdom often in the hands of Margaret and her allies. As the political climate deteriorated and the Wars of the Roses erupted, Margaret became the de facto leader of the Lancastrian cause, fighting fiercely for her husband's crown and for the future of their only son, Edward of Westminster, the Prince of Wales. Her letters during this period, often addressed to her supporters, allies, and even her enemies, reveal a woman under immense pressure, enduring unimaginable losses, yet maintaining an unwavering resolve. One can find in Margaret's communications the deep pain of separation from her beloved son, especially when political circumstances forced her to send him away for his safety. While there are no surviving explicit love letters exchanged between Margaret and Henry VI, her actions spoke volumes of her dedication. She fought relentlessly, rallied armies, and endured countless hardships, all in the name of preserving his throne and securing his legacy. Her fierce protection of Henry, even when he was unable to rule, indicated a profound loyalty and perhaps a complex form of love that transcended conventional romance, rooted in their shared destiny and their bond as parents to the heir. Her letters often contained pleas for aid, expressions of frustration with disloyal subjects, and condemnations of her enemies. But beneath the political machinations, there was a palpable sense of a mother's agony for her son, a queen's despair for her shattered kingdom. After major defeats, such as the Battle of Towton in 1461, which led to the temporary overthrow of Henry VI and the exile of Margaret and her son, her letters conveyed profound sorrow and fierce determination. She continued to write to foreign powers, begging for support, often describing the dire straits in which she and her family found themselves. She wrote not only for political advantage, but also to convey the personal suffering of a queen who had lost almost everything. One can imagine the crushing weight of despair Margaret carried after her husband was captured and imprisoned in the Tower of London. Her letters from exile, trying to secure alliances with France and Burgundy, show a queen who would stop at nothing to restore her family to power. These were not tender love notes, but rather calls to arms, filled with desperate urgency. Yet the underlying motivation was a deep familial devotion. Her communications spoke of the betrayal she felt, the injustices her family endured, and the unwavering conviction that she was fighting a righteous cause. She wrote to King Louis XI of France, describing the precarious situation of her son, appealing to their family ties, painting a picture of her small exiled court, clinging to hope against overwhelming odds. The emotional toll of this relentless struggle must have been immense, and her letters, though formal, were surely saturated with the heartbreak of constant loss and the burden of a dying cause. The ultimate heartbreak for Margaret came in 1471. After a brief restoration of Henry VI to the throne, the Lancastrian forces suffered a decisive defeat at the Battle of Tewkesbury. Margaret's beloved son, Prince Edward, her hope for the future, was killed in the battle, or immediately thereafter. The news of his death utterly broke her spirit. Her last surviving letters, written in the aftermath of this devastating loss, convey an almost unbearable grief. They spoke not of political strategy or future plans, but of the complete destruction of her world. Her husband, Henry VI, died a few weeks later, likely murdered in the Tower of London. Margaret was taken prisoner, her fierce spirit finally crushed by the weight of her losses. Margaret's letters from her eventual captivity, before she was ransomed back to France, paint a picture of a woman stripped of everything, her family gone, her cause lost. They are a testament to the heartbreaking reality of a queen who fought valiantly for her loved ones, only to lose them all. These letters, though not romantic in nature, speak volumes about a mother's fierce, heartbreaking love for her son, a wife's relentless loyalty to her husband, and a queen's profound dedication to her kingdom. They are a chronicle of heartbreak, written in the heat of battle and the cold despair of defeat, embodying the tragic resilience of a woman who gave everything for those she loved. Number 2. The Groom and the Bride and the Realities of Medieval Life. In the 15th century, a remarkable collection of over 1,000 letters, known as the Paston Letters, emerged from a Norfolk family in England. These letters offer an unparalleled glimpse into the daily lives, concerns, and emotions of ordinary gentry during the tumultuous period of the Wars of the Roses. Unlike the grand pronouncements of kings or the philosophical musings of scholars, the Paston Letters reveal the very human experiences of love, marriage, ambition, and heartbreak within a family striving to maintain its position in a challenging world. Among these letters are those exchanged between John Paston II and his wife Margaret Matby, which, while not always overtly romantic, portray the quiet endurance and deep affection forged in the crucible of medieval life. John Paston II, The eldest son of the family was often away from home, engaged in legal studies, political maneuvering, or managing the family's estates in London and other parts of England. Margaret, a strong and capable woman, was left to manage the family's properties in Norfolk, overseeing the household, dealing with local disputes, and raising their children, all while facing the constant threat of violence, plague, and financial hardship. Their correspondence, therefore, often dealt with practical matters, crops, tenants, legal battles, and the health of their children. Yet woven through these pragmatic discussions are threads of longing, concern, and the silent language of a love that matured amidst hardship. The letters from Margaret to John often convey her loneliness and the burden of managing their affairs alone. She wrote of the constant anxieties of the period, the scarcity of provisions, the dangers from rival families, and her deep concern for his safety. In one letter, she might describe a difficult legal issue, and in the next, express her worry about his well-being. "I pray you send me word how you do, and how you fare, for I hear no tidings of you which grieveth me full sore." She might write a simple sentence, revealing a world of anxiety. Her words often reflected the vulnerability of women left in charge during their husbands' absences, the daily struggles to maintain order and security in a volatile era. John's letters to Margaret, while perhaps less emotionally explicit due to the societal expectations of the time and the practical nature of their relationship, often showed his trust in her judgment and his reliance on her capabilities. He sought her advice on business matters, acknowledging her strength and intelligence. When he was ill or facing difficulties, his letters often conveyed a sense of weariness and the longing for the comfort of home and family. The shared responsibility for their children was a constant theme, and their letters often included updates on the children's health and education, revealing a deep shared concern for their future. The heart-breaking aspect of their correspondence often stemmed from the relentless practicalities and dangers of medieval life. Margaret frequently wrote of outbreaks of the plague of children falling ill and the ever-present threat of violence from rivals attempting to seize their lands. One letter from Margaret to John details her anxiety over the measles afflicting their children, her helplessness conveyed through the stark reporting of symptoms and lack of effective remedies. Quiet desperation of a mother powerless against disease, separated from her husband, is palpable. There were also moments of profound personal anguish. The Bastons faced frequent attacks on their properties. In 1465, their manor at Caister was besieged by the Duke of Norfolk. Margaret, a pregnant woman, found herself and her household under siege, surrounded by armed men. Her letters to John during this desperate time, though none explicitly survive from the heat of the siege itself, must have been filled with terror and appeals for rescue. The historical accounts of her actions during this period paint a picture of extraordinary courage and resilience, standing strong against overwhelming odds. The emotional strain of such events, the fear for her life and the lives of her children, would have been devastating. The letters also reveal the emotional toll of frequent and prolonged separations. John and Margaret often spent months, sometimes even a year, apart due to his duties. In an era before instant communication, the slow passage of news and the uncertainty of travel meant that letters were a vital lifeline. The simple act of sending or receiving a letter was fraught with anticipation and anxiety. A delay in communication could mean illness, danger, or even death. The yearning for news, the palpable relief when a letter finally arrived, or the quiet dread when one did not, are all threads woven into their correspondence. The heartbreak of their life was not always a grand dramatic tragedy, but often the cumulative weight of daily hardships, the constant threat of loss, and the quiet endurance of a love that, though rarely proclaimed with poetic flourish, was deeply rooted in shared responsibility and mutual respect. Their letters exchanged across distances and through times of great upheaval stand as a poignant testament to a real enduring love that was tested and refined by the harsh realities of medieval English life. A love that found its expression not in flowery verse, but in the steadfast care for each other and for their family. Number 1. The King and the Queen and a Love Turned to Dust. In the early 16th century, a love story unfolded that would grip England and change the course of its history forever. It was the passionate and ultimately devastating relationship between King Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. While this period technically falls into the early modern era, the dramatic intensity and sheer heartbreak of their correspondence have cemented their story within the broader popular imagination of medieval romance and tragedy. Henry, a young, vigorous, and magic king, found himself utterly captivated by Anne Boleyn, a lady-in-waiting to his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Anne was intelligent, witty, fashionable, and possessed a captivating charm that set her apart from the other ladies of the court. Henry, already married for 2 decades to Catherine of Aragon, believed his marriage was cursed because Catherine had not produced a male heir who survived infancy. He became convinced that his union was unlawful in the eyes of God. This conviction, combined with his burgeoning infatuation with Anne, set in motion a chain of events that would rock the foundations of the English church and state. For several years, Henry pursued Anne with relentless determination. Despite her initial reluctance to become his mistress, she aimed higher, desiring the crown itself. It was during this period of intense courtship, before their marriage, and even before his break with Rome, that Henry VIII penned a series of extraordinary love letters to Anne Boleyn. These letters, some of the most revealing royal correspondence ever written, lay bare the king's passionate obsession, his desperation, and his profound yearning for Anne. They offer a unique window into the heart of a powerful monarch, utterly consumed by love. These letters, written in his own hand, were sent through intermediaries, filled with longing, frustration, and fervent promises. In these early letters, Henry expressed his profound love and impatience, often complaining about the slow progress of his divorce from Catherine and the obstacles to their union. He wrote with an almost boyish infatuation, addressing her as his dearest mistress, and signing himself with a dramatic flourish, H. Rex, Henry the King, or your most loyal and most obliged servant, H. Rex. One letter, filled with fervent devotion, spoke of his inability to be apart from her. By absence and long distance it is impossible for me to be satisfied. And if you please, I pray you to remember that I have been a year and more struck with the dart of love, and am not yet sure whether I shall fail or find a place in your affection. He articulated his deep hope that she would yield to his desires and become his queen, pouring out promises of a glorious future together. He called her my darling and my own sweetheart, revealing a passionate, vulnerable side rarely seen in a king. As the political and religious struggle to annul his first marriage intensified, so too did the urgency in his letters. He wrote of his intense desire to marry her, expressing frustration with the Pope and the prolonged legal proceedings. He pleaded with her to keep her faith in him, promising that their union was inevitable. He penned lines like, "The love which I bear you will never fade, nor will it be diminished by absence, which only serves to make me desire you more." These words reflected the fierce determination of a monarch who believed his personal happiness and the future of his dynasty depended on his union with Anne. Their love eventually led to their secret marriage in 1533 and Anne's coronation as Queen of England. She gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, who would one day become one of England's greatest monarchs. For a brief period, Anne enjoyed the pinnacle of power and Henry's undeniable devotion, but Henry's desire for a male heir remained paramount. As months passed and Anne failed to produce a son, Henry's affection, once boundless, began to wane. His intense love slowly morphed into impatience, then suspicion, and finally, a chilling indifference. The passion that had once filled his letters was replaced by coldness, and the grand promises by a terrible silence. Tragic turn began when Anne suffered several miscarriages. Henry, desperate for a son, started to look for reasons for fault. Whispers of her supposed impropriety, rumors of her flirtatious nature, and accusations of witchcraft began to circulate at court, fueled by those who had always opposed her. The very qualities that had once captivated Henry, her wit, her independent spirit, her sharp intellect, now seemed to turn against her in his mind. The ultimate heartbreak arrived swiftly and brutally. In May 1536, Anne Boleyn was arrested on charges of adultery, incest, and treason. These accusations, widely believed to be fabricated, were designed to secure her downfall and allow Henry to marry Jane Seymour, another lady of the court. During her imprisonment in the Tower of London, no letters from Henry offered comfort or salvation. The man who had once poured his heart out to her in passionate prose now sent only a chilling silence, a stark contrast to his earlier fervent pleas for her affection. The absence of a letter, the lack of a single word of compassion or defense from her once adoring husband, was the ultimate devastating message. On May 19, 1536, Anne Boleyn was executed on Tower Hill. The love that had changed a kingdom, that had been expressed in such fervent, desperate letters, ended on the scaffold. The transformation of Henry's overwhelming love into ruthless indifference, culminating in her execution, stands as one of history's most profoundly heartbreaking love stories. Passionate love letters he wrote to her in their courtship remain a stark and agonizing contrast to the king who would sign her death warrant, turning a grand romance into a brutal tragedy.